Hi guys, I'm Andrew Henderson from Nomad Capitalist, nomadcapitalist.com, and I'm the author of the new book called Nomad Capitalist, How to Reclaim Your Freedom with Offshore Bank Accounts, Dual Citizenship, Overseas Companies, and Foreign Investments. Now, I've been running nomadcapitalist.com as a blog, and now it's a service that helps people go offshore, get passports, and become global citizens for almost 6 years now. I started writing about this stuff way back in 2012, and I get a lot of questions about my background and what inspired me to do this. And ever since the book came out, we've had a lot of people who have expressed an interest in hearing my background and what really motivated me to become the Nomad Capitalist and to do what I've done, which, as I've talked about before, goes from dramatically lowering my taxes down to right around 1%. To obtaining multiple second citizenships, owning homes around the world, recently giving up my U.S. citizenship. What would motivate someone to do those things? And so I wanted to talk in this video, not about strategies, not about specifics, not about the latest passport hack or the latest visa trend or the latest banking strategy that I've come up with. I wanted to make a video where I talked about who is Andrew Henderson? What is his background? People have asked, they want to know my history and all sorts of things, some of which is private, but I want to be as open as possible in this video and tell you kind of my biography and how I got to where I'm at today. Now, people who've attended some of our events in the past have heard this. People who come to my masterminds have heard this. Obviously, there are things that I talk about more and more frequently with folks in private, but I think that you deserve to know some of what got me to where I am today, because I think it's inspiring potentially for folks who want to, as I say, go where they're treated best. And so I was born in Ohio in the United States, in the Midwest. I had this very, some would say, Protestant upbringing where your word is your bond, and if you say something, you're going to do it. Just to this very kind of old school American upbringing. Nothing flashy, nothing crazy. Went to different schools growing up in Northeast Ohio. And when I was 12 years old, decided that I wanted to be in business. Actually, before that, I wanted to be a writer, and that's why publishing this book was so much fun for me. But when I was 12, I was motivated by people like Bill Gates to want to start a business. And so I had a lot of different ideas. Nothing really ever came to fruition other than just doing a lot of small-scale entrepreneurial stuff as a kid. But when I was 18 and I graduated high school, I followed my parents out across the United States to Arizona and didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be in business, but I wasn't really sure how to do it, and I felt stuck by the constraints of that all my friends in high school were going to university to become doctors, to become engineers, to become dentists. I mean, these were really smart people that were all my friends. I actually had some of the worst grades out of my friends in high school because I just didn't see the great purpose of wanting to do all this school and wanting to learn all these esoteric things. I wanted to be out and I wanted to be doing business. But I struggled with this idea that, if you just don't go to university at all, that there must be something wrong with you if you're an intelligent person. That was the construct that I think existed then and perhaps exists now even more, where people feel compelled to go to university. And so I did. I went to Arizona State University, well known as a party school. I felt that I could be with my family, I could have the support. I didn't really know where else to go because a lot of my friends were going to different places, and it was kind of an emotional time for me in life, and I wanted some support, and so I went there, and I went to Arizona State University. I really didn't apply myself there at all, so much so that whether they told me, hey, you're going to return, but we're going to be really watching you, or whether I just said, I don't want this. I don't recall exactly what happened. I certainly didn't get very good grades. And so I left the school. I enrolled in a lesser school, just kind of on paper, just to, again, keep up that construct for another year while I started my business and while I started a business in the radio industry, which at the time seemed like not the most innovative idea, but at least an idea where you could make money, unlike today where all the radio companies are bankrupt. But I started a business in the radio industry, and we tried some different stuff. We briefly distributed some radio shows, some successfully, some not so successfully, across the country. And ultimately we got into becoming one of the largest, what I would call market makers in the radio infomercial business, where we actually help people produce paid programming, where somebody who was a doctor or a lawyer would come to us and say, hey, I want to do a show that educates people about teeth, or I want to do a show that educates people about real estate law. We had guys during the financial crisis who wanted to educate people about foreclosures and for investors how you can buy foreclosed properties at a great deal. And so there were all kinds of these programs that we helped to distribute. Folks, people wanted to put out a message about health and alternative health and stuff like that. Religious groups. And so, we really helped create a market for a lot of those people, for the smaller people in that industry that wanted to educate people and by extension, get some business. And so I built that business up. We had a couple of different, companies, but it was really one business that went very well, and I became very successful. It was through that business that I remember being about 22 years old and starting to make a pretty good income. And despite growing up as a kid and knowing all about taxes and being kind of this libertarian kid and thinking how taxes were wrong and they should be low, you never really think about it until it actually happens to you. And that formed one of my core beliefs, that when it comes to the offshore business, it's one thing to have an attorney or an accountant who knows the theory. It's another thing to have experienced it in person. And so here I was. The theory of taxation to me was wrong, but then I went out and made a six-figure income, and I got this big bill that I had to pay, and it was far more complex than I could have ever imagined when I was kind of the libertarian cheerleader in my bedroom as a kid. And so I really realized, wow, I'm paying a lot in taxes. But I kind of put it to the side because things were going well. The business is growing. We did very well for ourselves in that business, so much so that I eventually started investing in other businesses that I could run. We invested in a car business that did very basic stuff, car repairs and car dealership stuff. And we basically came in, and my business partner and I injected our management skills into one of these guys who had a great sales ability and a great mechanical ability, but no ability in how to grow the business. And we put together a whole plan for exporting and all that kind of stuff. That ultimately didn't become as big as we wanted it to, but we made a few bucks. I went out on my own and started a business in the swimming pool business in Arizona, basically cleaning people's swimming pools. We took a company, or I on my own took a company with a very small company and built it into one of the largest companies in the city in the course of about a year and a half, and then sold that business and did very well with that. That was actually, I guess, on a percentage basis, my greatest hit. Taking a tiny business, doing some acquisitions, doing some organic growth, building out an entire team, creating one of the biggest companies, and then selling it to someone who wanted to be an investor, which was very rare in that space at the time. It was mostly owner-operators, and I wanted to turn that model on its heel. We also went out, my business partner and I, and started a business in the insurance company and actually obtained insurance licenses, which to me just seemed really not what I wanted to do. It seemed kind of stodgy to have an insurance license. No offense to insurance people. My father was in that business, among others, it was a good business, was a profitable business, but ultimately wasn't what I wanted. And so there were a couple other little things that I did. I had investments, I was doing stocks. I had a lot of different things going on, basically using the money from that first main business to create a life for myself. But somewhere along the way, I started seeking out advice on how to go offshore. I had already long been looking at how to live overseas. I was interested in dual citizenship. Even when the businesses were first starting, those were interests of mine and I was researching them. But along the way, now that I was making all this money, I said, how do I go offshore and save money on tax? And, ultimately, I got an offer from someone who was a tax guru in the US who says, I can tell you all the strategies, how to fix it. And I had some ideas. I'd been doing all this reading online. I knew about things like the foreign earned income exclusion, but I didn't really know how it all worked. I had these kind of fantastical ideas that were based in stuff that maybe worked 10 or 20 years earlier, but not really what worked now, what really worked in a legal way. And so this guy said, hey, he was a lawyer. He said, if you pay me, $15,000, that's kind of my intake fee. I'll give you everything that you need to know, and then I'll document it for you, and then you can go out and you can apply that in your own life. And I got really angry with the guy because I'd always run my businesses in this kind of very cheap way. I mean, I remember you could talk to my business partner, and back in the radio business, we'd have times when we'd have a $600 expense that came up out of nowhere, and I would not be very happy with that. So the idea of paying $15,000 seemed really crazy, and I got kind of upset with the guy. What was interesting is that I then went out and made an estimated tax payment, a quarterly tax payment that was more than that. Within the next 3 months, I went out and I paid more than that in taxes. And then 3 months later did it again, 3 months later did it again. So it's funny how and I think many other folks are so much more comfortable paying more just to stick with what we know. We're so afraid to go outside of our comfort zone that it's easier to pay $100,000 in taxes in a year than it is to figure out what we need to do to get out of that system legally. And so that was a lesson that I learned. Ultimately, I came around and I started traveling, and I started traveling more. I'd been traveling, I guess, basically since I started the business. But I started traveling a lot more. I started building a lot more contacts. I started going to events and meeting people and doing them at a high level, and ultimately put together the ultimate strategy for me to go offshore. Right around the time I started Nomad Capitalist, I was selling everything that I owned in the United States, and all the businesses got sold. In one case, I just did kind of a swap with my business partner, said, hey, you can have this, you give me that instead. He wanted to run that business on his own, so we arranged how to do that. And decided to go out and be a perpetual traveler. So I had been traveling a good portion, if not a majority of the year, while these businesses in the US ran. But my strategy wasn't fully optimized. And so I wanted to be outside of the United States, not only because I wanted my strategies to be optimized, but because I just wanted to be outside of the United States. I didn't feel comfortable in the United States. I didn't feel comfortable from a perspective of being a single person. I didn't feel comfortable from being a person, there politically. Just the environment didn't really suit me. I never really knew how to identify myself, politically or otherwise, because I had so many divergent opinions. And so I left the United States. I started traveling all around the world as a perpetual traveler, and really the goal of Nomad Capitalist was to write about what I was experiencing. I had some background, having already spent a number of years researching and doing travel and meeting people and doing stuff at a more superficial level. But I wanted to really dive in full scale and start writing about this stuff and start sharing the stuff that I knew and also sharing the stuff that I was learning. And so I started traveling around Southeast Asia. I started traveling around Eastern Europe. I started traveling around Central and Northern South America. And I wanted to figure out where were the best places to live, to bank, to run a business, to spend time, to do everything. And the first thing that we did with Nomad Capitalist, which was never intended to be a business, it was really intended, in all honesty, to be a blog and to be a radio show and to give me access to maybe talk to some people that were very selective in who they would accept. I mean, people who you really just couldn't pay them to get access to them. I wanted to talk to top business leaders, top experts, and I felt that having a blog would not only be fun for me as a temporarily retired person, but would be a good way to get access to people. And so the first thing we decided to do with Nomad Capitalist, my mentor and I, was to host a conference and to bring together some of the people that I'd met over my travels the first 5 years, and then talk about what I was planning on doing for the next 5 years. And so we had this conference called Passport to Freedom, and it was, I guess, the best attended offshore conference, I think, in our space of the year. People were actually very surprised how a first-time conference could attract so many people. But that conference was really my goal, just to get a meeting of the minds, just to get people together and be able to, again, build a network. Certainly it was designed to want to make money, because what I've learned from all my experiences in previous businesses is that money equals commitment. Anyone can just come to an offshore conference, but I wanted people to actually try and learn something from it. And I want people who are committed. So we hosted this conference, and people came from all around the world and attended. And then right away, I went back out on the road and started traveling more and continued to build my knowledge. Shortly thereafter, I sold my last home in the United States. Ironically, did pretty well with it. And basically cut my ties with the United States while maintaining a citizenship there. And did not return to the United States except for 7 days in 2017 when I went to go and meet with some bankers and meet up with an old friend. I didn't spend any of my time in the United States, and I really began to realize what it was like to live this truly international lifestyle. What I've learned over the last, I guess 10 or 11 years now of doing this, are all the mindset lessons that I wish I'd had in previous businesses. I could have made a lot more money. Despite the fact that I made enough to be able to retire for a little while and be able to not worry about having an income every day. I think I could have done a lot better. I think that's what doing business and that's what traveling teaches you, is you learn as you go. And so again, when I talk about lawyers and accountants, I work with lots of lawyers and lots of accountants. But what I've learned for myself and for the people that I help is you have to parlay their expertise into operational, actual on-the-ground knowledge. And so that's one of the big lessons that I've learned over the years, is learning that going offshore seems really difficult on one hand, and it also seems really easy on one hand. I mean, theoretically, you just buy a plane ticket and you go. I've learned why it's really not that difficult, but I've also learned why there is a lot of planning that's involved if you want to do it properly, especially if you're making good money, and especially if your goal is tax reduction, especially if your goal is getting a legal second passport and not just getting something that's not legal. So that has been my experience. People ask, why were you able just to spend much of your time traveling, even while running businesses in the United States? And I owe that to the advent of the location-independent business, which wasn't even being discussed when I started, but I kind of realized early on, I can go anywhere I want that has a phone and has an internet connection. I realized that back in about 2007, or even earlier actually, 2005. But I think it was what propelled me to be able to do all this was the fact that I never really felt that comfortable in the United States, and that my parents had encouraged me to go where I'm treated best. They had kind of given me this green light that I imagine most parents, most family members, most schools, most institutions don't give us. And I was really, proud of my family for saying that, even though they certainly wish that I spent more time in the United States. They wish that I were still a U.S. citizen in some cases. They gave me that green light. And so I think that what I was able to do is something that a lot of people don't feel comfortable doing, having had that green light and having had that lack of attachment to my home country, even from a very early age. I was always interested in the world as opposed to the United States. But what I've learned along the way is that you don't have to feel the same way that I do. You don't have to dislike your country or feel uncomfortable there. You don't have to give up your citizenship. But there is a strategy that works for you based on your own personal story, where you came from and what you're doing now. I think that's the powerful thing that I have come to appreciate in the position I'm at now as I'm publishing my new book, is that we're all different. We all have unique needs. We all have unique wants. And that me is this thought leader who reaches millions of people a year. You shouldn't just take what I'm doing and just copy and paste it in your life, because what you need and what you want is different. What allowed me to do this before there were many people talking about this stuff was my discomfort in my home country. What has changed now, a decade later, is that you don't have to have that discomfort. The barrier to entry is substantially lower than it ever has been before. And so my story involves a certain amount of barrier to entry, a need to run around the world, a need to figure things out for myself, because there weren't all the resources when I started doing this that there are now. Obviously, many of the resources now are not holistic. Some of them are out of date, some of them are inaccurate, some of them are just outright deceptive. But there are some good resources out there, and if you look long and hard enough, you can find them, and you can piece together a strategy. What I have really come to appreciate is just how easy it is to do this these days if you have the right help. And I can tell you, if you told me to go back and start the next Nomad Capitalist and build up to an audience of 4.5 million people, it was a lot of work. And I don't know that I'd be up for it today. Likewise, if you told me to go back over a decade and start this whole research process of traveling around the world today, at 33 years old, it feels tiring now in a way that it didn't at 22, 23 years old. And I don't know if I want to go back and do it again. I'm glad that there's so many more resources out there now and that this is much more acceptable now. For me, the idea was always wanting to be a bit of a contrarian and wanting to be different. And the good news is you don't have to be. The part of my bio now, I hold on to that contrarian part of my biography far less now as someone at 33 than I did at 23, where I so wanted to find a difference between myself and everybody else. Now, for me, it's all about enjoying life, enjoying the homes around the world, enjoying the freedom of multiple passports, enjoying the freedom of being able to travel and having relationships from people all around the world. Those are the things that the 33-year-old me appreciates more than I think I would have ever appreciated in my 20s. And so I think that your strategy can adapt. My strategy with buying homes started out buying cheap homes in different countries and testing the waters, and I've been in the process now of upgrading those homes to nicer, better located homes with, I think, better long-term value, because it's important to me to live the lifestyle now. Now that I have my strategy in place, now that I have the emotional element in place, it's just about enjoying life. And so I want to encourage you, number one, I want to encourage you to subscribe to our channel and check out all the other videos where we actually dive into the stuff that I'm talking about, from lower taxes, dual citizenship, investments all around the world, etc. There are legal ways to do these things, even if society still says it's not normal. It's increasingly becoming more and more accepted and more common. But number two, go and check out my book if you haven't read it already. We've had a lot of people who have read it, but it's called Nomad Capitalist. You can get it on Amazon, and it shares really in detail the story and the journey that I've been through over this decade plus, trying to figure this stuff out for myself, both, again, on a strategy level, on a personal and emotional level, on all the levels. I think that you have to understand that when you're doing this kind of journey, there is a holistic element to it. Saving tax alone, you wouldn't do just anything to save tax. There has to be a way where it fits in with your lifestyle. And I think that I've come to realize that, and I come to understand that when I talk to other people who want help figuring this out, that it's not just about what's the tax strategy, it's about what's the lifestyle strategy. So subscribe to our channel. Definitely go to Amazon and get a copy of our book, Nomad Capitalist, if you want to read more about my experiences, my stories, my anecdotes. And if you want to dive a lot more into these actual strategies in an advanced way, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com, where over these last 5 years we've written well in excess of 1,000 blog articles. We've done hundreds of videos. We've done hundreds of podcasts and radio shows. Lots of content out there. And I hope that you have a little bit better view of why I do this and what my background is, what made me the Nomad Capitalist. And hopefully you can appreciate the fact that that long, sometimes convoluted journey doesn't have to be your journey. Your path to success can be a lot faster, can be a lot more immediate, can be a lot less painful and a lot less confusing than mine. That's the message that I most want to impart to people, and I'm glad that you took the time to watch this video.